Well, howdy, and welcome to Monday's edition of Today's Bread. Now, we're continuing our series on prayer and exhortations in the Psalms with this week's installment, Prayer of Praise. Now, today's portion is Praise for Deliverance. Scripture reference, Psalm 18, verses 1 through 6. Now, in our distress, we need to call on God. During the years David spent in the wilderness tending sheep, he built a close relationship with God. There, he learned to rely on God. David knew of God's delivering power when God gave him the victory over various battles. And Psalm 18 is a psalm of worship David offered to God because he had been faithful to him. Now, David used the name Yahweh, God's covenant name translated Lord, to address God. Now, this is the name God revealed to Moses in Exodus 3:14. The I am is the God who is always with us and will be everything we need in our present circumstances. Now, in Psalm 18, verses 1 and 2, David expressed his love for God. He used several vivid terms to testify of God's intervention in his life. God was his strength. Now, the words rock or fortress refer to a place of stability and security in God. There, David was out of his enemy's reach. God was David's place of refuge. David also knew God as his buckler or shield, who protected him from his enemies. God was David's conquering strength. That's the horn of my salvation, who gave him victory over his enemies. Since David had known God's help in the past, he could confidently call on God for his present needs. You see that in verse 3. Now, the Lord was worthy of David's praise. David's language in verses 1 through 3 points at a truth we should not overlook. It is not enough to know about God. We need to know God. David knew God and had firsthand experience of God's working in his life. Now, as David declared his love and praise to a personal God, so should we. Life is not always easy, even for those who faithfully serve God. In verses 4 and 5, David described some of the difficulties that he had faced. The phrase sorrows of death indicates David was in such difficult distress that unless God intervened, he would have been killed. David was overwhelmed like a person who is being swept away by a flood. There was nothing he could do in his natural ability to save himself. In his distress, David called out to God for help. Verse 6, Lord, help. David knew God had been there in the past, and he knew he would be there when he was needed in the present. David was confident that God would hear his petition. God is on his throne in his heavenly temple, with his ear tuned to the cries of his people. God's intervention in the past is proof and encouragement that he will be with us when we are in need and we call on him. Thank you, and I pray that you've enjoyed today's edition of Fresh Daily Bread. Church isn't a place to go to. It's a family you belong to. So come be a part. Now, Monday's prayer focus is pray that churches would focus on a deep, relational, Christ-centered discipleship. Now, remember, Jesus, he's coming back soon. And now, here's Monday's blessing. I bless you with the power of Jesus Christ that produces in you every good thing that is pleasing to him.